Hi, I'm Emily Balcetis. I'm an associate professor of psychology at New York University and author of Clearer, Closer, Better: How Successful People See the World. I'm a behavioral scientist who investigates those things that stand in our way of success and offer evidence-based solutions to overcome those obstacles that increase the odds of meeting your goals. Today, I'm going to talk about contracting time and distance to help you move 23% faster and experience 17% less pain. I'm going to talk about increasing team members' interest in committing to a goal that they aren't even necessarily interested in themselves. And we'll talk about the power of foreshadowing obstacles to hit your own outcomes.
Welcome back to part 2 of our delicious conversation with Emily Balcetis. She is the author of the best-selling book, Clearer, Closer, Better: How Successful People See the World. And she's been speaking about in the previous episode in part 1, in case you didn't catch it, get back there, go listen to it now. It really talking about how we need to be nimble and understanding that there is no best practice that actually works as a one size fits all. And we looked at that and how we've got to develop our toolbox and how you get people to do things by compressing time or compressing the perception or the distance of time. And we're going to go into that a lot into this part here. I want to really make sure that you get a chance to understand how you can apply this into your life in not only motivating yourself, motivating your team, and not as in rah-rah motivation, but actually getting people to step into it. And you can use this in your family, with your kids. It's very powerful, and I highly recommend it. So let's jump back in, Emily, and let's talk about that. You've laid out these 3 steps when setting goals to improve the odds of success, because, as we're recording this, it's going to be released. As you're listening to this, it's early 2022, likely. Maybe you'll listen to it much later, but early 2022. You might have even gone through this whole idea of setting goals for a new year. But how do you actually set the goals to improve your odds of success?
Thanks. Yeah, this work, really started with a deep dive into a goal that is shared by so many people. When we think about New Year's resolutions, the number one resolution that is set from year to year by by most individuals most often is to get in shape, right? I want to have a healthier life this year than I did last year. And so, that's something that we really focused on. Okay, everyone is setting this goal. And what is the reason that they aren't succeeding? The answer is not that they don't care. It's not that it changes how important it is. It's not that they're talking to themselves in the wrong way or using, self-sabotaging. Those are not the reasons. It's that people go about setting goals using an incomplete strategy. So often when we, set New Year's resolutions, or any point in time where we decide, okay, let's double down and let's focus on what we really want, we come to that point with great enthusiasm. That's what's inspired this moment of reflection.
Yes.
And we start off high. We set these goals that might even be at the level of impossibility. We are excited for this moment to try to transform ourselves, and we shoot the moon. And that's not necessarily bad. The problem is that oftentimes the process of goal setting stops there. That we think that, new year, new me, that's a pretty lofty goal, like to reinvent yourself entirely. And that might be exciting for a little bit, but then you face your first obstacle. Life gets in the way. You get waylaid by something else that requires your immediate attention, and you might experience what some might say, or what you might even call yourself, a failure. Or it just feels like, this got a lot harder than I thought it would be. And then we drop off the bandwagon. So the problem is that when we're setting goals, yes, we need to be excited. We need to find something that's going to inspire our energies. But in that same session, that same brainstorming session where we are articulating the goal, we need to add on a couple other steps. So we need to have that big vision, right? We need to set this intention for transformation, or whatever it is that we want. But in that same moment, that same opportunity, we need to think concretely. What are the
Mhm.
steps that I need to take? Break that high level, distant goal into something that is more concrete. What do I need to accomplish this month if I want to have this be successful by 6 months' time? What do I need to do by the end of 2 months? And then also, what can I do this week? What can I do today? Now, coupling that sort of abstract high level vision with the concrete planning is really effective. I think there's a great example that I know of with a Dutch telecom company that looked at the effectiveness of this coupling of abstract vision, concrete action planning. And what they did at a moment of transformation was set a pretty ambitious conservation goal. Sustainability was really important to this company. And so they brought in a professional media company, a communications team, and told everybody in this large company, we're going to start recycling. You got recycling cans now by each of your cubicles and your desks. Anything that can be recycled, but you're throwing in the trash, make a change. And so they articulated why this is important. We're in it as a team. Let's all do this. Here, we've made it easy for you. Just put the stuff in the recycling. And they swapped out the janitorial staff for a research team. And every night they counted how many items showed up in the trash can that could have and should have been recycled. And what they found was that simply stating this new goal did nothing. It did not increase recycling. It was the same number of things that were showing up in the trash can. But they suspected that this would be the case, that it wouldn't be just enough to communicate effectively what we're doing now. Let's all get behind environmentalism. Because they recognized that just simply stating a high level, stretch goal, if that is language that resonates with your listeners, is not going to be enough to actually change behaviors.
Yes.
So they compared that experience to another experience where, again, they brought in the communications team. Sustainability really matters. Everyone do this thing. And then said, now take a minute, each individual employee, and think about what can you do? What's 1 or 2 concrete things you can do that will help us with this sustainability goal? And people came up with things like, if I use a paper cup, I'll throw it in the recycling. Or if I have extra paper that I don't need anymore, I'll put it in recycling and not the trash. There's nothing magical about those statements, right? It's exactly what they hoped would happen. But taking that moment to have individual team members engage concretely with thinking about what can I do that aligns with my company's high level vision was enough to produce major change. So again, when they counted the number of things showing up in the trash that should have been in the recycling containers, they saw that, at baseline, about 1,200 items were showing up in the trash each week, but that dropped to about 150 after adding on that simple step of concrete action planning. And that sustained for 2 weeks, for 1 month, and even 2 months later after having gone through that experience. And importantly, from 1 month to 2 months, they moved the individual recycling cans away from desks and put them into a communal space. It was harder, right, to actually recycle. People had to get up from their desks and then go somewhere in the center of the office, which is of course important because it costs a lot of money, right, for each person to now have a trash can and a recycling can, and that may not be sustainable financially for companies, whereas consolidated recycling center is something that can be sustained financially. So even despite the fact that the behavioral change became harder, after a 2-month lag and having engaged in high level visions paired with concrete action planning, the company continued to see individuals making changes and having formed a habit that was well aligned with what their goal was. So that's, so to come back to the main point, yes, have that passion, have that vision, have that stretch goal. And in those same sessions, when we're articulating what is this goal that is important to us or to our team, think about the concrete actions that we can take as individuals that align with that goal. There's one more element too, but did you want to reflect on that?
No, I think that oftentimes that's one of the things that I see is missing is how do you take it to ownership? We have this great vision and we're this great purpose and blah, blah, blah. And people I don't give a shit.
Yeah,
it doesn't relate to me. And what you've just said is how could you, which is inclusive, and then there's ownership, which is so important. Thank you.
Exactly, right. It brings the individual into this, to this bigger goal. And so, and it not doesn't necessarily mean that the individuals care more personally about recycling, but as you said, you've invited them into the process and then they do it, right? It's not too hard to think of like 1 or 2 things I could do to increase my recycling efforts. So fine, I'll do that. But now they've done it. And psychology tells us that once they have engaged in an action, then they start to believe that they care about that action. Oh, if I did this thing, if I started thinking about how I can recycle, I guess that means that I care about recycling. Otherwise, why would I have spent the time to think about how I can recycle? It's sort of, you can take advantage of how people's brains work, their individual psychology, to get that sort of ownership that's important for sustaining behavioral change.
And then that next step.
Yeah, the third and final step of when we are setting those goals and thinking concretely about what we can do as individuals that align with that high level goal is that we need to think about the obstacles that stand in our way of accomplishing those concrete actions in the high level vision. And that increases motivation. And for some people, that's counterintuitive, maybe not for you or for your listeners, but for some people it is that if I just got excited about this thing that I'm going to do to transform my life, and I thought about how I can do it, I'm going to be more motivated if I think about all the different ways that I'm going to fail. How is that going to get me through? How's that going to inspire? And again, the metaphor that works for me is, thinking about when you get on an airplane, why do they tell you where you're going to find your life jackets? Right? It's so that you're prepared should something go wrong. In the rare instance that something goes wrong, that's not the time for you to start scouring underneath the seats or in the overhead compartments. You need to know what you can do. You don't have time, you don't have mental resources, you don't have the bandwidth to start thinking creatively and searching for resources to help solve your problem. You want to have that plan B or plan C already at the ready. And the same thing happens is true about other goals that we'll be working towards. Is that again, when we're up against an obstacle, we're short on time, we're short on money, there's some challenge that we hadn't originally planned for, that's not the time and it's not the space for us to think at our most creative, right? So if we have done that work in advance, when things are calmer, when there is more time, more resources, and more opportunity, we'll already have a jump start on that process. Like a great example that I came across that really resonates with me is thinking about Michael Phelps, great swimmer, one of the world's best swimmers. And this 3-step plan is something that he integrates into his practice sessions routinely throughout his career. What is that I want to achieve? What can I do today that will align with that goal? But what are the obstacles that I might face that I can practice now? So in 2008, he was at the Beijing Olympics for the first time, sort of on this international stage and on the brink of doing something that no Olympian has ever done in the history of the Olympics, which is win 8 gold medals in a single Olympic game. At the time of this story, he had already won 7. He just needed to win the 200-meter fly, his jam, in order to break Olympic history. So as he dove into the water, his goggles started to leak. By the time he had done 3 lengths of the pool and had just 1 length left, his goggles were completely filled with water. Now, and he couldn't see, he was swimming blind. If that happened to me, which it never would, because I would never be in the Olympics nor swimming and alive, I would have completely panicked, but not at all for him. Because as a part of his routine practice with his coach, he practiced swimming with his goggles leaking. Or in some instances, just as he would dive in a practice, his coach would rip the goggles off his head and smash them on the ground for dramatic effect, I guess. And he would practice swimming without being able to see. So when this happened in the 2008 Beijing Olympics, he knew exactly what he needed to do. And that was start counting his strokes, because he knew exactly how many strokes it would take for him to get from one end of the pool to the other. He did that. He won the 200-meter fly. He won his 8th gold medal, and he would go on to win 15 more in his career. And so to me, I think that greatly exemplifies the power of having foreshadowed obstacles, right? As when he was up against this challenge, that had he not already thought about this possibility and planned for it, he wouldn't have that go-to strategy at the ready. It may have cost him an extra half a second of time, if not more, and he would have lost, right?
Yes.
But because he had practiced that was part of his routine, this 3-step process, and he did something that no one had ever accomplished before in history.
So we create the big vision, the BHAG, whatever one term wants to use, of where we want to go. We chunk it down and we say, okay, what can I do today, or and maybe chunking it down. What can I do in the next 6 months, 3 months, 1 month, 2 weeks, 1 week today?
Mhm.
We chunk it down, and then we go, and that's where most people, I think that's where most advanced people would stop, right?
Mhm.
Because they go, I'm not setting a goal. I've chunked it down, dude.
Mhm.
But the key thing here is, and counterintuitive, is what are the obstacles and how can I practice for the obstacles? It's the reason in SEAL training they throw you into horrible situations, not because you have to be in a horrible situation, but if you are rather, you can fall back onto the training. That's what they always say, fall back on your training. So this is that piece. It's like fall back on the training for the potential obstacles. So if there is a pandemic, what will happen? If there is a massive talent shortage, what will happen? If there is all the things that we're dealing with today, what will happen? Being ahead of that curve. Now, of course, nobody can plan for every possible thing, but I think that oftentimes if you plan for obstacles, even if those obstacles don't come up, the active stepping into obstacles gives you the training in your mind for dealing with any obstacle. So even though you're prepared for your goggles leaking, if something else happened, it automatically puts you into that mode of I can cope. And I think that's really powerful.
Exactly.
So,
I mean, in our first conversation, we were talking about the power of mindset and the danger of wanting that instant reward.
yeah.
And I think, this practice of foreshadowing obstacles, creatively thinking about possible solutions should we experience this obstacle, is another tactic that leaders can use to communicate the expectation that we might experience problems. In fact, I expect that we will experience problems because we're going to spend time talking about what they could be and what we'll do instead. So, that's another way. These conversations are another way that we can get people out of thinking like, I need to be a star. I can't make mistakes. If I make a mistake, then I'm going to hide it because I don't want anyone to find out, lest I be fired or not promoted. That's another tactic that we have in our arsenal as leaders to communicate a culture of growth rather than of instant productivity and star potential.
Yeah, that is very, very powerful. Now, you did, in part one, we talked about this compression of time, and now we've talked about the chunking down from the big issue, looking at the obstacles. But there was a piece in there that was actually that I found really fascinating that gave us those insights that I quoted at the beginning, which is about 17% less pain, etc., 23% faster. Talk to us a little bit about that, because I think that our listeners will find that truly fascinating in the context of the way that we perceive things to be versus how they actually are.
Yeah, just in the same vein that we were exploring, 20-year-old saving for retirement, and that future self just seems so far away. In a sense, that same issue comes into play when we're talking about health and fitness and trying to get people to, or ourselves, to walk further, walk farther, go for a run, and get our shoes on and get out, get moving more. When we ask people, why can't you walk 2 miles? And they say, because that's really far, especially people who are struggling. If it's a new goal or they feel out of shape, the number of steps that they need to take or the distance they need to travel to meet some sort of, daily marker of physical activity just seems really insurmountable, in the same way that saving for retirement seemed insurmountable to younger people. And so once we were, talking to individuals and trying to see like what is standing in their way, what are the challenges that they face, we were seeing those same similarities. And so we thought, okay, if contracting time is one way to inspire people to make a change today that will benefit them in the future, maybe we could do the same thing with the way that we see space, that we see distance. And what we found is that people who are out of shape, who experience chronic pain or chronic fatigue, or who are heavier, rather, heavier than their ideal weight, they literally see distances as farther. A stop sign looks farther away to them than it does to somebody who isn't experiencing these, physical impairments that would make exercise.
I want to put a pause in there for a moment, because I want to say, did you hear that? I know you're probably listening to this podcast while doing something else, but I want you to hear that somebody who is out of shape, looking at a distance that is exactly the same distance from a person who is in shape to the person who's out of shape, it literally looks further away. It's the same 100 meters, that to one person who is in shape, it looks closer. To the person who's heavier or out of shape, it looks further. Like, can you grasp that? It's the same in scientific reality. It's 100 meters, but perceptual reality, it's not. Like, can you grasp that the person you're looking to get to a success, who has failed and been punished for failing, will see that success further away than the person who's had success and been rewarded for success, to put it in the context of leadership? I want people to grasp that. I know, I apologize for interrupting you, but it's like, that's a punch in the nose, pay attention moment.
Thank
Please
you.
carry on.
I love your enthusiasm, because you're nerding out scientifically the way that I do. I found that to be incredibly fascinating and just so illuminating too, because it takes us out of the realm of victim blaming or self-blaming, right? Like, somebody might look at someone who is out of shape or who isn't meeting whatever goal it is that they hold and say, like, oh, they're not trying hard enough, they don't care. But they usually are. They usually do care, and they really perhaps are trying as hard as they can. It's just in their mind's eye and in their psychological experience, they are up against a challenge that is much greater than it would be for somebody who has had success, like you're saying, or who isn't struggling to meet this goal or sustain this healthy lifestyle. So that was really interesting. That was sort of part one of like, okay, you know what, the experience is quite different and poses unique challenges for people who are out of shape but trying to get there. And I coupled that with some interviews that I got to do, again, with some of the world's fastest runners that were, have been like multiple Olympic athletes that had competed in many different Olympic games. And I asked them, what are you doing as you're looking around, as you're running the fastest in the world? What are you looking at? And to me, not as a successful runner, but my intuition was like, they probably have like amazing vision, that they're able to track the competition. They know where they're going, I don't know, like they have bug eyes or something. They're seeing all of it. But I was completely wrong. And they said, no, I just choose a goal. I just focus on the goal. And that might be like the curve up ahead or the finish line, depending on what their race is, or, a building, if they're running a marathon, the next building that I can see that I'm going to have to run past. And I'm focused on that. And I'm not paying attention to where everybody else is. It's almost as if they have blinders on. They're assuming a very narrowed focus of attention. And so then I thought, okay, well, that's something we can teach people. If people knew that successful runners are looking at the world this way, which is not what my intuition was, then maybe we can change their performance as well. And we did that. So we taught people, choose a target, focus on it, imagine there's a spotlight shining just on that goal, and walk there or run there, and then set another goal and focus just on that. And what we found is that by having people assume that way of using their eyes when they're exercising, that goal looked closer to them. Even for people who are overweight, out of shape, experiencing chronic fatigue or chronic pain, we changed their perceptual experience. The world looked different to them. It looked easier to get there. And that change and that perceptual appraisal of that context they were in had all kinds of downstream consequences. Now they said, oh, I think I can do this. It doesn't look so hard anymore. I think I'm up to this challenge. And so that change in vision produced a change in their psychology, which then translated into better performance. That's where they moved 23% faster. They said it hurt 17% less. And as a result, they walked again the next day. They took more steps, they walked farther, and they were able to repeat this healthy behavior because their experience defied their expectations. So you can see this host of downstream consequences by this simple change and where people are looking and what they're focused on. So that simple tweak early on in the experience can cascade into tremendous outcome differences.
Yeah, I mean, just, we talk about, you are literally talking about vision in the context of the eye, but we can talk about vision in the context of having a vision for something, and that compressing of that time and distance is so powerful, and yeah, you're right. It is something that you and I nerded out about when we talked about it last time, which, it's just, I'm always, one of my comments is that courage is subjective. It's one of the things I teach people. Courage is subjective. You look at me and you watch me on stage and I'm speaking to 10,000 people and you go, oh my God, you're so courageous. No, I'm not. It's not courageous for me. I realize for you, it's terrifying, and it would be courageous for you. Organizing my filing cabinet, that would be courageous for me. Right. But for you, you might do that every day and you're like, it's easy. Right. So it's entirely subjective. And now, is it the same filing cabinet? Yes. Is it the same crowd? Yes. So what's the difference? Nothing more than my perception of it. And you've given us a strategic, practical way of moving that, making that go, oh, okay. Yeah, I can do that. And demonstrably in the context of 23% faster and 70% less pain. Oh, I'll sign up for that. Right. Who doesn't want that?
Right.
That's
like
pretty good.
The job hasn't changed, right? They're still walking the same set distance when we tested in our studies. It's just, as you're saying, their experience of it is subjectively different. And that is what produces a change in their mind and their mindset, and then their actual outcomes. So
we're very, very close to the end of the show, but I have to bring this up. I want to bring this up, which is our audience likely doesn't know that this New York University professor is actually a classically trained musician who plays jazz, who was in a ska band. And, you and I talked about ska last time. I love ska. How do you think that has impacted the way you look at what it is you do today? The whole world of classical music and playing jazz.
Yeah, I mean, music is fascinating for so many reasons, and one of them is that it's best done with others, honestly. And the same with science. It's best done with others, and the same with innovation or productivity or increasing your bottom line. It's very hard to do your best work alone. And so my background in music, I think, has given me a great appreciation for that. If anybody else listening is a musician, you get these moments where the sound waves are aligned, and it's like, it makes your body feel like it's going to explode, that you can feel it resonating inside of you, and something happens. You produce art that is not just 1 + 1 = 2. It's like 1 + 1 = 25.
Yeah.
Right. It's this emergent property that can only come from the combination of different perspectives, different instruments, different sounds. And so, that I think has been philosophically what I've taken with me from my studies of music into leading a large team to produce scientific discoveries, is that when you bring in different perspectives, it's not just that it helps you get more money, but it produces knowledge that you wouldn't be capable of producing with just your own one narrow voice or instrument sound.
That's such an important piece for leadership today. That we thank God, are emerging from the hero leader world where I'm the leader, I have all the answers, and you have to come through me, to the collaborative leadership mode, which is we are greater together. And, the difference between, you can have a solo in a band, but you need the band, right?
Yeah.
Even your
Right.
solo, if you went on stage and did your solo without all the other stuff that came from the band before and after, your solo kind of like, it was just showing off.
Right.
But when you're in that milieu of your band, whether those are a band of scientists or a band of leaders or a band of innovators or whatever it is, that is and as you said, it's catalytic to that resonance. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Emily. It's been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much for being with us. Again, please tell our audience where they can find out more about you and about the book and how they can reach out.
Sure. I try to post everything I can on LinkedIn to share what we have learned as widely as possible. I write for Psychology Today. You can find some of the articles that take the science and apply that to today's social issues. And of course, you can find the book wherever books are sold.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much for sharing with us, and we really appreciate it. And for you, dear listener, remember that you can hang out with other conscious leaders. You can chat about this episode or any of our past episodes instead of our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. Just look for Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. The truth of the matter is, it doesn't matter how successful you are. If your employees and your customers don't understand what gives your company meaning, you're only working at a fraction of your true capability. To find out how you can hire me, Dov Baron, as a speaker or leadership strategist for yourself or for your organization, simply go to dovbaron.com, DOVBARON.com, because unified actualized meaning is the one single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for individuals and companies. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about how you can compress distance and time and achieve your goals with a heck of a lot more speed and a heck of a lot less pain. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep is possible meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.